There is no activity where my emphasis on learning by doing applies more than when it comes to editing. You learn how to edit media through practice and experience. You learn by trying things out and getting things wrong. But I can provide some advice here. The first thing you need to consider is, what do I need? Well, you need an editing program, and for making podcasts, I highly recommend using the free program Audacity. It took me a few hours to get the hang of Audacity, but once I'd made my first podcast on it, I had all the basics worked out and I was ready to make my next one. I should also emphasize that the edited podcasts you're seeing here are considerably more complex than I would generally expect students to make, but have a go and you will surprise yourself. As with making other media, your first podcast will always be the hardest you make, so it's crucial to start preparing and practicing early. Of course, learning is an ongoing process, and I'd made at least 3 podcasts before I discovered that I could do what's called a split cut. A split cut allows me to keep a gap between different sections of audio instead of deleting that middle section that I don't want and joining the sections together. Most of the time I do just use the delete key, but every now and then a split cut can be really handy and does save me some time. When you use Audacity, there can be issues with the compatibility of file formats, and depending on the format of the audio files you've recorded or the music files you've downloaded, you might need to change the format of those files so that Audacity accepts them. I use the free program Format Factory to do this, and it really only takes me a few seconds to copy a file into a different format. I should also note that when I record audio on my smartphone, the ability to pause and overwrite a section of narration that I've messed up means that I'm essentially making the editing process a lot easier, if not actually starting the editing there. As I stressed in the last episode on podcast planning, the more time you put into a script and know what you're doing when you come to record, the easier you will make things for yourself. But there will be times when editing with Audacity comes in really handy, and the more nuanced and effective your editing is, the better the end product will be. Take this example of me discovering that the sound of a door closing was impacting on a point being made by a speaker. You said you wanted to know how you could provide them with value. You said you wanted to know how you could provide them with value. You said you wanted to know how you could provide them with value. Audacity helped me clear things up within a few seconds. Another important piece of advice is that once you've begun the editing process, make sure you don't move the files you're using around to different places on your computer. If you do this, your editing program will get confused and any links to them will be broken. To repeat the key point that I made earlier, it mostly comes down to learning by doing, so download Audacity and play around with a small audio file. By doing this, you'll save yourself a lot of time and stress when things go wrong later. I've been making podcasts for a few years, but I still went into a small panic when I accidentally clicked the wrong button and Audacity started making me sound like an alien. I thought for a moment that I may have ruined the whole project, but as it turned out, I'd somehow managed to play my narration backwards, and it was quickly resolved. To make you feel a little bit better about the prospect of editing a podcast with Audacity, which can be complicated enough, I thought I'd end this video with some footage I previously made of video editing, which is far more complex. There can be a lot of components involved in editing, and the naturalizing function of this kind of media, whether it be a video or a podcast, often disguises the very complex work that's gone on behind the scenes. This is the final shot of the editing I undertook for a 7-minute welcome video that I made a few years ago. Things are never going to be this complicated when I make a podcast, but don't assume that it's the easiest thing in the world to do either. The last point that I want to make is that as with media making generally, editing is really rewarding and can actually be a lot of fun. As you can see on the front cover, people have microchips or feeds implanted in their minds or their Have you seen my external hard drive?
Yeah, you said.
Have you seen my external hard drive?
Yeah, you said to recycle.
Honey, have you seen my external hard drive? So that's about. If they're not actually being sort of graded until we see the finalised project, it's okay, Tiff. And the other thing that you really... Tiffany. It's alright. Good girl. Okay. Yep. And I strongly encourage you to move forward with that process at the rate that the group has Tiff, good girl. Yeah, you scared him away. Good girl. Alright.